They felt it first as a whisper, a slight, unremarkable shudder that ran through the hull like the tremor of a sleeping animal. In the dim lounges and quiet cabins, in the engine rooms and on the bridge, hands paused on railings and a few voices exchanged puzzled questions. Outside, the black of the North Atlantic lay flat as glass. Below, along the ship's starboard bow, steel met ice, and the whisper became a wound. The night is April 14th, 1912. The Titanic is steaming through cold, calm seas, her lights bright against the dark. Passengers walk the decks in wraps and coats. Some linger over late coffee. Stewards close up public rooms. In the bowels of the ship, stokers tend the fires in the boilers, the iron heart that drives the liner. The collision happens just before midnight, a grinding, tearing shock that is at once mechanical and elemental. There is no great explosion. There is the sound of metal scoring metal, the sickening clamor of plates and rivets giving under. Pressure, the breath of the ocean pressing through an opening that should never have been. On the forward decks, men rush to the rail, expecting perhaps a steer clear and a practiced shrug. Instead, they see a shadowed bulk of white ice receding into black water. Then, over the rail, a wetness on the hull that is more than spray. Down in the cargo spaces and forward holds, seams part and rivets loosen. Water does not flood like a dam bursting. It insinuates itself, a cold fingering that finds every seam and crevice. The first compartments to take on water are the forwardmost, the lower holds, the forepeak, the very rooms that had been designed to be the ship's buffer against the say watertight bulkheads are supposed to rescue a vessel from such misfortune. Titanic's designers believed that the ship could stay afloat with up to 4 forward compartments flooded. The theory is engineering distilled to reassurance. Compartments, doors, valves, barriers to the water's appetite. But design is measured against contingency, and the iceberg has carved a longer wound than engineers anticipated. Water pours in through multiple breaches along the starboard bow, and the judging meter of the ship's fate begins to tip. Inside, the lower decks, the noise is peculiar. The dull, inexorable thud of the sea pushing into empty rooms, the bubbling, the metallic groan as plates flex and frames bend. Crewmen in those spaces, trained for maintenance, know to act. Closing valves, checking pumps, running to the telegraphs that summon the engine order from the bridge. The pumps kick in, a frantic chorus of mechanical voices trying to outpace a force measured in tons per second. For a while, the machines protest and keep time with the crisis. Water rising into bilges and being moved away only to be overwhelmed. The men work by the light of carbide lamps, the glow trembling over faces hardened by coal and long shifts. In the first minutes, hope clings to routine. Above these compartments, the mailroom and storerooms begin to show the first indignities. Paper curls, dampens, then sags. Cases of provisions, barrels and crates slosh and shift. The sound here is less the rush and more the incremental. The clatter of a crate slipping free. The dull thump as a chest rolls across a deck. Stewards scramble to save trunks, to pull out inventories, and to staple down documents where they can. In passenger cabins nearest the impact, the initial sensation is sometimes merely a series of tremors. A picture frame fallen askew, a glass jar toppled. But in others, there is the quick intrusion of cold, pressing under door frames and pooling along thresholds. Up on the boat deck and in public rooms, the mood is slow disbelief edged with annoyance. If a sudden gust had rocked the ship, an officer might have issued a calm explanation, and the world would have slid back to normal. Instead, the men on the bridge, trained to read sea and instrument, feel the tilt in a way ordinary passengers do not. Radio operators are sent for. The Marconi room becomes a hub of urgent signals. Orders begin to move along the ship like a nervous signal. Investigate, assess, report. Below decks, at the forefront of the problem, the forepeaks and the forward boiler rooms are the first to surrender to the sea. Boiler rooms are loud and hot places, even in normal hours. When water reaches them, the violence amplifies. Water mixes with coal dust, steam hisses as superheated surfaces meet cold, and the boilers, starved or shorted, begin to mist and shudder. Engine room men fight for valves and levers, trying to maintain steam pressure so the pumps and the lights stay alive. For a time, electricity continues to light the ship. That glow, The lamps in corridors and the chandeliers in the dining rooms gives passengers a false sense of continuity. Outwardly, the liner looks unbroken. Beneath the veneer, the ship is recalibrating toward disaster. Floodwater does not behave like water in a bathtub. In a complex structure, it fights gravity and seeks the ship's low points, slipping along bilge keels, through ventilation trunks, around cable conduits. Bulkhead doors, closed to hold water back, are designed to be sealed from the bridge or automatically by wax studs and mechanisms, but they are not hermetic vats. In places where watertight doors close, they can slow the progress and buy time. But the bulkheads themselves have a design limitation. They rise only so high. If the forepart of the ship fills and the bow begins to sink, the water is allowed to spill over the tops of bulkheads into the next compartment, an escalation by inches and then by rooms. As the forward compartments fill, the bow begins its slow, terrible list. Passengers on the promenade decks watch as the angle forward deepens imperceptibly at first, and then more obviously. Chairs left on deck gather a sheen of sea. Water flushes in through open portholes and scuppers. Spaces that were precise and dry become beads of brine and mud. The first-class saloon, the smoking room, the library. These grand spaces are not immediately affected. They are elevated in the ship's vertical geography and remain for a time islands of normalcy. But the forward trajectory of the ship means those islands will not remain untouched. While officers measure trim and the captain gathers facts, water is already planning its path. Crewmen make decisions with the speed of practice. Lifeboats are prepared, the tone shifting from assessment to precaution. The lowering of boats begins amid the friction of routine and panic, for the boat deck is where the sea and the ship meet most directly. As the bow sinks, the angle alters. How lifeboats can be launched. Davits, winches and falls must operate within geometry suddenly skewed by a sinking fore. Men strain at ropes while waves and spray appear for the first time where none were expected. The choreography of evacuation, beneath the pressure of time and the fog of astonishment, reveals how human systems try to readjust to a new, brutal physics. Meanwhile, below the waterline, the mailroom, cargo bays and crew spaces are now drowning in quiet. The sound is not of cries alone, but of mechanical tragedy. The creak of beams, the pop of rivets as plates separate, the long, low moan as loads shift and structural supports sigh under strain. In the engine room, the dynamos struggle. Motors tick and falter, and eventually, hours after the impact, electric light levels will dim and fail in parts of the ship. For the men at the furnaces, whose job ties them directly to the ship's operation, there is a grim numerical calculus. How long can steam be kept before the boilers extinguish, and what lifelines will that loss sever? Passenger experience diverges, wildly by class and location. In first-class promenades, passengers might light cigars, debating what had occurred as a curiosity. In second and third class, the sense of alarm can be more immediate and visceral as corridors fill with the scent of seawater. Crew members work to preserve order and to move people upwards, but communication across decks is imperfect. The hierarchical architecture of the ship, sumptuous private suites above and the servants' quarters below, shapes who notices first and who has access to lifelines. The physical geography of the vessel becomes the social geography of survival. A number of small scenes recur in survivors' testimonies and in later reconstructions. An officer shining a lamp down a stairwell and seeing the ripple of dark water. A steward trying to wedge open a port to render a passage crossable. A woman hearing the persistent, weird vibration underfoot that signaled structural stress. People remember the clanking of boots and the shuffling of men moving crates and coaxing cattle to safety in other maritime stories. On Titanic, those mundane sounds are mixed with a new urgency. The orchestra plays, or perhaps some musicians, continue for a while because music is both a comfort and a cloak for panic. The image of calm, a line of men in uniform guiding women and children, traverses both myth and record. Water can be kind or merciless in how it enters. In some spaces it rises slowly, giving time for deliberate action. In others, a single ruptured plate means a rapid rush, a throat of water that surges in, roars outward, and leaves precious little time to react. The forward watertight compartments are the latter. Stokers in boiler rooms sometimes have only moments to scramble toward hatches and to hope pumps can buy the remainder. The structural temperament of a ship under load is complex. As more weight piles forward, the stern lifts, altering propeller immersion and the ability to maneuver. Rudders become less effective. That change further narrows options for the captain and officers, weighing whether to steer for shallow water or to attempt to keep position for rescue. Communication outside the ship also matters. Wireless telegraphy transmits calls for help into a midnight filled with static and shock, two letters that carry the smallest possible hope of immediate rescue. The Carpathia and other ships respond, gather the distress calls, but distances are staggering in the cold Atlantic. The initial minutes of flooding are decisive, and the world's ability to respond is measured in hours. The knowledge that help might come later does nothing to slow the EC tide. The human stories in these early moments are full of tiny heroic arcs and of human failing. Sailors and officers move with instructive competence, closing doors, trimming sails, lowering boats, yet the very design of the ship resists easy salvation. In some cases, men choose to stay below to work pumps and to give others a chance. In others, orders are given that will seem cold and pragmatic later. Who will go into the boats first, at what speed, how to weigh precious seconds against the slow arithmetic of a ship going down. Decisions are lit by lamplight and fear. As the hours pass, spaces once ceremonial become tenacious with water.